All right, everyone. I just wanted to thank you so much for joining me to talk during your lunch and learn a little bit about David Gilhooly. My name is Andrea Feller. I'm the Curator of Education here at the museum, and I've been part of the museum's team since 2006, when I first joined the staff as a Wingate curatorial intern while I was working on my master's at ASU. After my internship, I was promoted to the Curator of Education, and I've served in that role ever since. One of the biggest joys in my job comes from watching people walk into the museum and have their eyes filled with wonder and awe right before me. It happens every day we're able to be in the museum just watching people see art, either see a piece for the first time or see something that they love. My connection to David Gilhooly goes all the way back to my very first day at the ASU Art Museum, with my own eyes being filled with wonder and awe at the time, and I want to share my introduction to David Gilhooly with all of you. So let me set the scene for you just a little bit. It's my first day at the museum, and I went on the grand tour. And this included all of the front of the house spaces, all of the galleries, all the behind the scenes places with the galleries. And it seemed like every 2 steps, we were popping into someone's office to meet them and greet them. So keep in mind just the amount of people I've been meeting and walking. And if you go through the entire building at the ASU Art Museum front and back, you can get disoriented very easily at times because it's confusing for the first time that you walk through the whole thing. So just when I thought we were done, we weren't. We had our whole other facility to go to. And so we headed across the street to our Ceramics Research Center. Yes, this is way back when the Ceramics Research Center was literally across the street. It has since moved up the street, so it's just a couple blocks north of its previous location. But this is back in the day when it was right across the street. So it was like most Arizona days, warm. So we walk into the space and I just get hit with this blast of cold air. And then I saw this work. Now, just keeping in mind everything that I had told you about where I was. Now at this time, I had never heard of David Gilhooly. I had taken several ceramics courses over my undergraduate career, and I had just finished a course at ASU, so I knew a little bit about ceramics. And I knew of the Ceramics Research Center, but I hadn't, since I just started at ASU, I really hadn't had the time to spend a lot of time. So seeing a space full of ceramics just excited me. When I was with my then supervisor, we approached this piece and she asked me, "Do you get it?" Now, at this point, I'm got information overload and I'm like, get what? And I was nervous and I don't remember what I said, but it was something like, I'm not sure what you're going for. And, you know, she apologized. So I'm going to ask the same question I was asked. Do you get this work? I'm just going to let it sit here for a moment and let you get it. But in my answer, I did my best not to sound stupid. And my supervisor was really kind. So the answer to the question is this, that David Gilhooly was responding to this work of Marcel Duchamp, New Descending a Staircase number 2 from 1912. Now this work is one of the most famous works of this period. Initially, it was rejected by the Cubists for being too futurist, although Duchamp stated he was never a futurist. Rather, he was interested in the movement and the speed that was important in that era. Then, later, he was asked to change the title of the work when it was going to be included in its first exhibition in 1912, and he completely rejected the thought of changing this title, so it didn't end up being included in the show. The first time it was shown was in the 1930 Armory Show in New York City, and it was ridiculed at its time. And I have the wrong button on. And so one of the things he did is one of the things that happened with this time was the critics immediately made fun of this piece. And one of the things that they did was they called this piece Food Descending the Staircase. And a few years later at the Armory Show, there was a parody of the most outrageous works in the show. And it was prolific, talking about the food descending a staircase. Now, I feel like I'm in good company here because not everyone got this piece. It looks like about half of you, about almost 50-50 of you did and didn't. So I feel like I'm in good company with not everyone exactly getting it at that moment. So For those of you who got this piece, if you answered yes, and yes, you're really in good question, I have another poll. How many of you were actually right? Did you immediately see Duchamp's New Descending a Staircase cat? Can you bring up the next second poll?
Yeah, I'll bring it on. Keep talking. I'll pop it on in a second.
All right, no problem. So Gilhooly again returned to the subject 16 years later in this piece. So he did a print based on the same subject matter. And this is a hand-colored print that we also have in our collection. So now the real question is what does food and Duchamp have to do with the title of this talk, Frogs and Dogs? I promise you, I will get there. But let's first learn a little bit about David Gilhooly. So Gilhooly was born in 1943 in California, and he pursued his education at the University of California, Davis for both his bachelor's and master's. So again, okay, poll one popped up again. So again, it's his rise into ceramics is a very interesting story. So when he was there, he studied under Robert Arneson, who's actually another artist who's prolific in our collection. But he first signed up for ceramics classes because he was trying to impress a girl. And what's interesting about this woman that he was trying to impress was by the time the next semester rolled around, she was no longer enrolled in school, and actually during the break, she actually married someone else. So he actually never had the opportunity to even go out on a date with her. So the whole relationship with the girl didn't work out, but his relationships with ceramics did work out for the best. For his whole time when he was at UC Davis, he was Robert Arneson's assistant in the gallery. So he was in charge of the kilns and everything. I see, and we've got some really smart people in here. So we have about 67% of you who knew it right off the bat. You guys are great. And then I appreciate the 33% as who. I really feel with you on that. So at this time with UC Davis working with Robert Arneson, let me tell you just a little bit about this, this piece right here. So this is one of the works in the museum's collection. It's called Rooted. So the top is a self-portrait of Robert Arneson made out of bronze. It doesn't look as well in this photo, but basically the eyes are completely gouged out. He was looking at ancient Greek and Roman bronze sculptures. They're noted because initially their eyes were filled with beautiful inlays, and it was the first thing that was stolen from these sculptures. So he wanted to have his piece look like it was a piece from antiquity. So there's actually little marks that make it look like the eyes were gouged out. And then right before you in the center on the bottom, kind of right here, we have kind of like a nod to Michelangelo's The Touch. And then the side you can't see is basically a self-portrait of Arneson with his arms out as a Vitruvius man, which he was very noted for. So Arneson, along with another group of people, were part of a funk art movement. This is an art movement that's very loosely organized. It was a lot of people working together. It was really associated around the university, although some other people worked in that flavor. It wasn't an organized movement. It was more just a group of people. They named their movement after funk from the jazzy term funky, describing passionate, sensuous, and quirky. And a lot of people had the same thoughts about funk art as they did jazz in the 1920s, that it was very unrefined. So during his work at UC Davis, Arneson and the other students would challenge each other to make functional ceramics that at the same time had something that was far out, grotesque, and just barely functional, but still functional. So this is when Gilhooly started working with frogs. So he would add a frog to the cup of his mug, or he would put a frog in the bottom of the cup. And some of these initial pieces are what started the frog series. After graduation, he taught for about a decade, and he worked at various places from San Jose State College to the University of Saskatchewan, York University in Toronto, and then he did 1 year as a visiting instructor at UC Davis. Of all of his work, the frog series is what David Gilhooly is most known for. So in the museum's collection, we really have significant holding of Gilhooly. So we have 54 total pieces, one print that I've already showed you, one paper mache sculpture, and 52 ceramic pieces. And really his themes were frogs, dogs, food. He has mythological references that include his frogs and dogs, and then other animals. One aspect that Gilhooly used to the fullest was humor. He used this as a tool to get the viewer's attention. So I'm going to give you one piece that made me laugh the first time I saw it. Oh, well, here's the first quote. I use humor in my work to get people's attention. Whether they know what's happening during the time I made it or not, they can respond to the humor. So this is the first piece of Gilhooly's that I saw. So this is that I immediately saw his humor and laughed, is corned beef and rye. So we have a little cow with a little piece of corn sticking out of its mouth on 2 pieces of bread. The other thing I want you to notice that we'll be talking about later is just how realistic like the bread looks. So he has this amazing ability to really capture this texture of the food. What he is quoted as saying is, what he likes best about clay is if you don't like the way something really is, you can always fix it up. So why frogs? So he first started making frogs in 1965, and he liked the idea initially of making pigs better than frogs, because he just was so impressed by how smart they were and how clean they were. But he felt that a pig world would be a little bit too loaded, because there's a lot of thoughts that people have about pigs, and some of them are negative. And he didn't feel at the time in 1965 that that was really the case with frogs. And so he chose to have frogs be his exploration into the world. So the frog world allowed Gilhooly to create the world as he thought it should be. He explored the ancient worlds of Greece and Rome and Egypt, creating frog counterparts to these historical moments. Now this is the frog world. So it's sometimes altered from reality, and with things occurring just a little bit different. It also told the mythology of different cultures. And at one point, the worlds of frogs and food merged, creating food a very important part of frog world. So let's take a look at some of the pieces that we have in the collection. So this one's really one of my favorites. This is his Trojan horse. What I really appreciate is his Trojan frog, is just his attention to detail. So this is 100% ceramics, and even when you look at it in person, he has this amazing quality. So these pieces of clay truly look like they're wooden boards nailed together, which is really fun. And then this is his fake Wedgewood Grand Tour of North America. In case you are unfamiliar with Wedgewood pottery, it actually traces back to 1759 in England with the potter Josiah Wedgewood. And as part of his experiments, he developed colored pottery with white vessels on the figures. He did a lot more classic, a little mythology, but very beautiful, refined pieces. And this type of pottery is most known for its blue, which is called the Wedgewood blue. Now, Wedgewood pottery is still around today. They have an extensive training program, and it takes 10 years in their program to be a master craftsperson of Wedgewood pottery. Gilhooly turns this tradition on its head by sharing the Frogs Tour of North America in a lot less refined manner than Wedgewood pottery is. If you look at their pieces, they still are active and selling work. If you're interested, if you just Google it. Then we have the last of the frog myths, the Neolithic period, Ice Age return, eternal Christmas. It's just his juxtaposition of different things. I'm sorry that the white on white, I'm not sure how well it shows, but we have snow on top with it appears to be a frog world type Parthenon with animals from the Neolithic period convening and talking and turning into another ice age. He talked a lot about things that were important, things that were bothering him, things that were just happening in the world around him. He also explored Christian themes. So this is Fix a Frog. So we have our frog world version of Christianity and the frog Christ. And then I have this lovely one, frogs leaving from the LA airport. I'm kind of jealous. It looks like their parking situation is much more agreeable then than it is now. Also knowing that this piece dates back to 1966. Then we have Fast Food Bacchus, another one of my favorite, throwing back a nice cold soda. He has a pizza sash on, hamburgers, French fries, hot dogs, tacos, you name it. This Fast Food Bacchus has truly got the hookup. And then we have slightly disturbing to me, because I love ice cream, a double dipped chocolate frog ice cream cone. So it's this nice piece of very realistic frog dipped in ice cream cone. And then we have, it's always important to keep in touch with your friends. So we have a frog with his other animals that are his friends going to a birthday party. Quite the traveling. It's going to be hard to get too far with a boat with cactus surrounding you, but that's what our imaginations are for. This is Frog Food on the Way to Valhalla. So in case you're not familiar, Valhalla is from Norse mythology, and it's a majestic, enormous hall located in Asgard and ruled over Odin, where those who die in battle must come back and fight for Odin for Ragnarok. Now, this is just a little slightly different story than the Thor movies produced by Marvel, but if you've seen those, a little twist. What I find interesting in this piece specifically is this piece has it's frog food. So not only are frogs the characters in his world, but sometimes the frogs themselves are the food. So instead of a protein, or maybe it's a vegetarian sandwich, we have little frogs and frog pieces stacked inside of the sandwiches. So one of the things that Gilhooly shared about publicly was he struggled with food consumption. He had a tendency to overeat, and he struggled with his weight for a lot of his life. And so one of the things he did to cope with this, and a means of trying to diet, was he started to make this food intentionally so very realistic that it would serve as an appetite suppressant. So it looked lush, it looked great, he wanted to eat it, but then at the end he's thwarted because it's clay. So I included these three pieces in the museum's collection for you to show you today, to think about frogs in your cereal. Are they bathing, or are they part of the meal? There did become a point, and the exact timing is a little unclear, because I directed a lot of my information directly from David Gilhooly's website, which he wrote himself before he passed away. And he said he gave up the frog series in the 1970s, as he felt that he explored it, but there are a few pieces that don't date quite right. He did revisit the series with commissions. If someone needed a piece, then he would go ahead and go through that and go ahead and make that. And then I thought we would continue with our little dogs. So one of the things that Gilhooly did constantly on the side was he would make portraits of pets. So he also did any type of pet someone had. So if they had a pet pig, they had a pet cat, he would make portraits of their animals for them to have. So we have two dogs in the museum's collection. We have Max and we have Fifi. And these are during my entire time at the museum, they have usually served as a way to greet visitors, nice and visible. They've been at the front, they've moved around, but they're usually in the front of the museum to greet you. They're a big favorite with kids, because Gilhooly wrote in his writings that he would have times that people would walk up and pet the dog because they thought it was a real dog, which is always fun, that trompe-l'oeil ability of art to really, truly trick you and make you think like you're really looking at a real dog. One of the pieces I want to end with this is a portrait as leftovers from 1989. He did stop working at clay at one point in his life, and he only made a few pieces through the rest of his life. He had a sketchbook that he found as he was starting to transition, and it was of unfinished business, as he called it, and he had to revisit ceramics in order to kind of complete that circle in his life. After ceramics, he worked for a while in plexiglass, and then he moved to plastic assemblage. And then in the end, he did a little, he just kind of continued to dabble in that way. I want to share this quote with you. And it says, "The studio is bereft of clay and glazes. The kilns are gone. Slab roller, wedging tables, glaze brushes, fettling knives, etc. have been sold in or given away to make room for saws and sanders and storage space for new materials. The dialogue has remained the same. The artist comments on food, consumerism, religion, mythology, but is now using plexiglass as his voice." So I have a fun little challenge for all of us today. If you didn't see it in the chat, I will give you a second to get a request to get a pen of some sort and a piece of paper. So although David Gilhooly is no longer with us, he passed away in 2013. I thought, in light of Frog World and everything that Frog World stands for, our ability to, or the artist's ability to change the narrative, to talk about different things, maybe warp reality in a little different way than it is today, I challenge you to take 2 minutes and to do a little drawing, or if words are a better tool, your artistic tool, or if you want to jump on video and do something in just a minute when I ask for volunteers, share with me what piece do you think should be made regarding the Frog World today. So I'm just going to give you 2 minutes and I will share mine. All right, so I think it's been about 2 minutes. So I will start with sharing mine. And I did only spend 2 minutes drawing it. I just didn't draw it during this. So I think we should talk more about vacations. So this is a little frog family at the beach, drinking their cold beverages and lounging by the ocean. Is anyone else willing to share theirs or in text or chat?
We're the education department. We will call you out.
Bobby is sharing.
I like it, Bobby. Anybody else?
Bobby, I think I was on the same page as you. Hold on a second.
That's perfect, Brittany. So I'm seeing some on the chat. Socially distanced frogs. Admire my beauty, rub my tummy, all colors. Frog statue instead of a Confederate general. Frogs and pugs. That's perfect, Mickey. one last call if anyone wants to share what they think the frog world should explore and to share with the world. All right, well, if anyone has, they become brave and want to share later, we'll be here. This is the end of my presentation. Does anyone have any questions? Would you like to go back to any of the slides? What else would you like to know?
So we have a question from Dina. Andrea said, what made him give up ceramics?
So in all of his writings, he talked about how the clay wasn't serving him as much as it was before. He was very bold in his basically his website autobiography, saying, I gave it up in the 70s. But there's pieces that date after the 70s. So I just think at a certain point, it's also a very laborious, like in the last quote when he talked about all the supplies, I think he just wanted to explore something different. At different times he taught different things. So there was a time he taught watercolor. I just think he just was, think he felt like he exhausted the material for him.
And then Bobby asks, why did the museum collect so much of his work?
So part of the reason why we collected so much of his work, it was a gift of a local collector who was very interested in his work and gathered this just great capsule that really showed the, a really focused part of his view of the world and his ceramics, and that was donated to the museum.
Mickey asks, is there a connection with pop art?
So Gilhooly never really specifically talked about it. However, there is some, because part of the frog world involved celebrities. Of course, their frogified version of the celebrities. So there was a lot, so there is some crossover. That really isn't, and what I found really wasn't spoken about in terms of his direct pop art collections, but he was very much aware of the world around him and incorporated the everyday for that time into his work. So I do think there are some connections to pop art.
We have time for a couple more questions. Tina asks, what themes did he explore in Plexiglas?
So it was a lot of the same minus the frog. So it was still a lot more food. If you just search David Gilhooly, his website comes up. There were images of his plexiglass images, but when he made his website, they're only like an inch tall. And by the time I imported them into the presentation, they're just pixelated dots. But you can get an okay view on his piece. Some of them were a little bit more abstract than some of his earlier pieces, a little less representational. He was very interested in the layering and the ability to manipulate the colors, but it was still very much about his time, about food, about mythology, and about tweaking the world around him.
Very cool. So I have a question, Andrea. Since you're the curator of education, can you share with us how, PK through 12 or younger people interact with his work, or do you think they, find it easier to engage with his work than other pieces in our collection? Or
I do believe when you take the younger groups to Gilhooly's work, when you're touring them around the Ceramics Research Center, they really like the identifiable subjects. A lot of kids love animals. His frog world and his pieces are always a little funny. Not everyone appreciates his humor and not everyone gets it. You usually have a different piece. Some of his more conceptual pieces with mythology and theology, if you haven't learned about it, then those pieces kind of you just go right over. But in general, it's usually a highlight for them to think about. You know, I'll ask the question like, if you were going to make an imaginary world, what animal would you use to create this environment? So it's pretty fun in terms of having them look at it. They also, in general, they like anything that has that degree of trompe-l'oeil, making something look like it isn't. And so anything with those, from my experience touring, that's what they really love doing.
Very cool.
I'm looking at.
All right, if we don't have any other burning questions, I will say thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you so much, Andrea, for sharing. It was really engaging. I had a good time. I enjoyed learning about other people's favorite foods. And as a reminder, our next Masterpiece at Midday will be August 18th at noon. We'll be on Zoom, and it will be with Mickey Garcia, our director. Until then, be well, everybody, and thank you for learning with us today.